government should do three things. One is it should develop the Northeast in par with the rest of the country. That is, government should invest economically, developing farming, agriculture, industry and other areas, so that the people of the Northeast that have suffered most will be able to return back to normalcy. Government also should have a very long-term strategy to devolve power at the center, not in the periphery. That is, right now the thrust is for greater autonomy of the Northeast. This is a wrong model, because already the politicized people will want to create that as a platform to create a separate state. To prevent that, what government should do is have a prime minister who is a Tamil, have a vice president who is a Tamil or a Muslim, so that the minorities of this country will feel that they are getting even more than what they deserve. And only if you do that, there will be permanent peace. People.
Now, Professor Gunaratna, for the past 30 years, successive governments tried to win the war but failed. Now, this time, what was the successful strategy that won us the war?
There were three reasons. One is the Sri Lankan Navy, led by Admiral Karannagoda. He detected and destroyed the shipping fleet of the Tamil Tigers. Second is that the military expanded, and under General Sarath Fonseca, army fought on multiple fronts. And the third aspect is that under Secretary Defense, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who coordinated the work of the Army, Navy and the Air Force, led by Rohan Gunaratna, he coordinated these three armed forces, the police, the civil defense organization and the intelligence services. And he made sure that the pressure on the LTT was sustained over 2 years and 8 months.
So it was a collective effort.
Yes, and, it was teamwork.
Yes. In a recent interview, you have emphasized that Sri Lanka must try strategic partnerships with the US, EU, China, Pakistan and India. Can you elaborate further on this?
There's a theory in Sri Lanka that if you work with the Indians, the Pakistanis, the Iranians and the Chinese, it will do good for Sri Lanka. Certainly it will not. It is true that Pakistan is our ally. Pakistan has helped Sri Lanka with weapons when most countries refused, including India. It is true that China sold Sri Lanka weapons. But I want to share with you that all these countries are 20 to 40 years behind the United States. They are behind in terms of economic development, political understanding, international reach. So Sri Lanka's traditional and oldest friends are the Europeans and the Americans. It is not these newfound friends. And for Asia to become the epicenter of development, epicenter in terms of international standing and stature, it will take a long time. So until that time, it is only wise for the Sri Lankan leaders to engage the Europeans, to engage the Americans, to resolve any misunderstanding they have with the Americans and the Europeans, to ensure that there is constant flow of funding and assistance from those countries. So the bottom line is Sri Lanka should engage everyone, the Chinese, the Iranians, the Indians, the Pakistanis, but also the Europeans and the Americans. It is a huge mistake to say, look, we are going to abandon the Europeans and the Americans because they have criticized us. I think that we should take those criticisms, we should counter them, because there are a lot of misinformation in the US State Department report, in some of the European reports, because the Tamil Tiger International Network was able to hoodwink some of those American politicians and European leaders. So we have to counter those allegations. We can't throw those reports and forget about it. We need to have a point-by-point rebuttal. That is statecraft, that is diplomacy. This is the duty of the foreign ministry to advise the president to do so.
And related to that answer, many say Sri Lanka did not get adequate support from the Western countries, in particular in fighting terrorism. and even some quarters of the government say so. Do you believe this? Did we actually get support or not?
The Americans have helped. Americans provided a lot of intelligence. Americans trained the Sri Lankan Special Forces. Of course, the Sri Lankan Special Forces are now better than the American forces. The Americans trained the Sri Lankan Special Boat Squadron, the small boat teams that hunted the Tamil tiger, sea tiger capabilities. The Americans also helped Sri Lanka a lot in building some new capabilities like psychological operations or influence operations. Even the Israelis, although strictly not in the West, helped Sri Lanka with DORA, fast attack craft, unmanned aerial vehicle, and various other technologies. So I think to say that these countries didn't help, it is incorrect. But I want to tell you that there's a reason why the Europeans and the Americans have behaved a bit strangely to Sri Lanka. It is because the Tamil Tigers have very large lobby groups in those countries. And the Sri Lankan Foreign Ministry doesn't have the muscle and the understanding and the strategy to counter that. Before the Tamil Tiger lobby group, support group, buys a journalist, the Sri Lankan Foreign Ministry should do so through its embassy. It should work with the journalists, explain to them, fly them to Sri Lanka, show them how more than 1 million Tamils are living happily in the south of Sri Lanka. Show them what the government is doing to rebuild those areas in the northeast. If Sri Lanka is not going to proactively work with the journalists, with the civil society organizations, the NGOs, work with the international community, with those European and Western governments, we will fail. Sri Lanka's name will be mud. So Sri Lanka needs to build new platforms to fight this new campaign. LTT has been dismantled in Sri Lanka, but LTT is still a very significant entity internationally. And peace in Sri Lanka, future peace in Sri Lanka can only be sustained by the government of Sri Lanka working with its international partners overseas to dismantle the LTT network overseas.
Professor Gunaratna, do you think that there is a possibility of LTT re-emerging or a similar group re-emerging and causing similar problems to Sri Lanka? And any examples from the world stage of such scenarios?
JVP re-emerged. There was an insurrection in 71 and there was an insurrection in 87. Certainly the Tamil Tigers can come back. But I want to tell you that the Sri Lankan military, the government has done a lot. They have built certain capabilities to detect those threats. And today the military and the intelligence services, the law enforcement agencies, the police, they are very powerful. But certainly the LTT's intention overseas is that. And that is why it is so important for the Sri Lankan government even to talk to Rudra Kumaran. But there's another faction of the LTT called Nediyavaran faction, and this faction is still portraying the images of Prabhakaran, the tiger flag, and they want armed struggle, meaning terrorism. So Sri Lankan government should work with those foreign governments to dismantle the LTT structures overseas. But this battle can only be fought if the Defense Ministry and the Foreign Ministry, the Information Ministry, working with the intelligence agencies, working with the law enforcement agencies, especially the police, and they are able and willing to work with Western governments, with other countries. Like Tharmalingam Shanmugam Kumaran, alias Kumaran Padmanathan, was brought home. It is important to bring some of those people home. Firstly, to invite them for a dialogue, discussion, and to resolve the differences Sri Lanka has. And if they are unwilling to cooperate, and if they are persisting on a track of violence, of extremism, then they should be brought back home. So government should have a long-term strategy to secure Sri Lanka, to ensure that there is permanent peace in Sri Lanka. This can be done only by working with the Tamil community, winning their hearts and minds, both in the northeast, in the south, internationally, and also making sure that there is no survival and revival of the LTTE.
Professor Gunaratna, unfortunately that's all the time we have today. That was a very interesting and informative discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.